I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.
Hello there, Price of Reason here with a special report. Ever since the cancellation of the poorly received Disney Star Wars series The Acolyte, it seems like there's been an ongoing aggressive campaign to demonetize content creators who didn't like the show, with channels like Star Wars Theory, Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, and Outpost being considered the biggest target since they, and I hope you're sitting down for this, didn't like The Acolyte series, produced by Kathleen Kennedy and written and created by Leslie Headland, also known as the former personal assistant of Harvey W. But today I would say that this campaign has escalated once again, with an article released in Forbes magazine seemingly joining in on the discussion in just the way you'd expect from a typical, overly politicized legacy media outlet. I mean, you'd think that a show like The Acolyte that was cancelled due to poor ratings wouldn't require any more reporting, but nope, because to the mainstream media, it no longer matters if a show is actually good or not. It no longer matters if a show actually has an audience or not. These days, it's all about ideologies, politics, corporate maneuvering, quid pro quos, the message, and maintaining relationships. And this type of attack is exactly the type of nonsense we saw after the release of The Last Jedi in 2017, a movie that many moviegoers simply didn't enjoy, who were then labeled as ists and phobes. And while these kind of petty attacks from the access mainstream media have become very commonplace over the years, especially due to the special personal relationships that these reporters often have with studio executives, I would argue that what we're seeing now is an unprecedented, coordinated attack not only on creators, but also on free speech. In this video, I will be discussing what appears in a new article about the Star Wars fandom civil war, but more importantly, what I believe is happening behind the scenes and in the bigger picture. And if you're interested in hearing this type of exclusive analysis, please make sure to like and subscribe. Today's Forbes article is called "The Acolyte Has Caused Star Wars Fandom to Plunge into Civil War" by Paul Tassi, senior contributor over at Forbes. Now let's see what Paul has to say. You think the drama of The Acolyte is over? Think again, as now what has been arguments about content of the show has progressed into a full-on civil war in the Star Wars fandom community. I mean, is it really a civil war? They're basically trying to suggest that the reason that The Acolyte didn't do well was because there were a bunch of ists and phobes online that didn't like the show. You know, entertainment doesn't work that way. Have you seen the show One Piece? Because that show has a pretty diverse cast, and the show was a huge hit for Netflix. And I say this as somebody who has studied screenwriting in the past. The Acolyte is just really poorly written. It's a bad show. I guess a group of activists that have good relationships with the studio, it's not enough to sustain a TV show that costs $200 million to make. There's just no audience for it. The two parties are fans that appreciate shows like The Acolyte and did not appreciate what seemed to be a coordinated, relentless assault on the show and its actors by YouTubers and their subscribers. What are you talking about? Stop trying to make it seem like there's two sides here. Arguments don't equal viewing. You either watch a show or you don't watch a show. They are attempting to demonetize many of those accounts which they believe are ists or encourage targeted harassment campaigns. Again, a show had no viewers and it was cancelled. The saga of The Acolyte is well known at this point. The show was little watched but developed core base of fans who really liked it. No, having a few shills that like the show is not a core base. If there were people watching it, it means that it's worth it for the streamer or network or studio to make more of that show. Nobody was watching, they're not going to make any more of it. Ranging from its representation, a black lead and an Asian heartthrob as its villain, to its storyline, split from the Skywalker saga by several hundred years. I mean, what does it matter what the color of the skin of the person who was in the show is? The fact that it's a black lead or an Asian heartthrob has nothing to do with the show. You could have the best actors in the world, you could have the best directors, you could have so many great things, but if there isn't a screenplay that really tells some kind of story, then it's not going to work. And unfortunately, this is the type of behavior we constantly see from Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. A company has to be accountable for what they do. She's the president. The show didn't do well. Go out and say, we failed. We fucking failed. We don't know how to do this. We made a show, we suck, because that's the truth. All this other stuff is nonsense. The YouTubers in question devoted dozens, if not hundreds of videos dedicated to tearing down the show, and everyone associated with it every week, which led to not just pushback from Acolyte fans, but stars like Amandla Stenberg publicly talking about the racism she experienced. This is absolute nonsense. Amandla Stenberg did a video which basically attacked the fans. She tried to tie the poor reception to the show with police and black people, which had nothing to do with this show. She also was talking about 400 years of oppression. Having a person who's black as the lead is not a solution for bad writing. It's not something that you can say, well, we hired this lady, she doesn't seem to be the best actress, and the show is very poorly written, but if you don't like it, you're an istanophobe. That's basically what we're being told. Maybe in this situation, it's best not to do weird rap songs where you're twerking and attacking the only people that may even watch your show or be interested in watching it. Then the show is canceled. Given that Disney is, well, Disney, the decision likely came down to mainly an absurdly high cost, which was very much Disney's fault, and low viewership, though many, including some of the cast, credited the istophobia and harassment and felt it gave a win to toxic parts of the fandom. Members of the Star Wars community in support of shows like The Acolyte and its actors banded together to create a movement to try to get a number of specific Star Wars channels demonetized with examples of what they believe was istanophobe behavior in their videos, which should be against YouTube's terms of service. Now again, if you look at a lot of these videos, most of them, they are just saying what they didn't like about the show. I myself, after every episode aired, I did a live stream, and I would never go after a person for not agreeing with my opinion. I would never go and want to take away his livelihood. I would never try these campaigns to get people canceled. You like a show, somebody else doesn't like it, live with it. We can't all love the same things. Apparently, there were more people that didn't like The Acolyte than there were that did like The Acolyte. So they put this Rewriting Ripley post, which probably a lot of people saw, that basically they asked YouTube if they could demonetize Nerdrotic, Ryan Kinnell, and Geeks and Gamers. YouTube got back to them and said just her back and confirmed that this content is not violative and will remain up. So now YouTube didn't go along with this narrative and didn't cancel these channels. That's probably the reason why this escalated to even an article in Forbes, because all of these people, they really want to see all these channels demonetized. I think it's fear that these channels that at the beginning people wrote off as the vocal minority are now apparently the vocal majority. And also, the reason why I think a magazine like Forbes, along with Paul Tassi, want to weigh in this way is because at the end of the day, they themselves are also part of a dying medium. This legacy access mainstream media, they're losing the power. What they're doing is just trying to hold on to it by any means possible. Since this happened, fans have now pointed towards people moving on to comment on a black actor's Instagram that they want the Acolyte treatment, viewing that as a threat to mount to similar movements. Okay, going and finding one Instagram post on all of social media online from a person that wrote a comment and using that as a umbrella statement that represents some kind of fandom, that is an absolute lie. This is not sufficient evidence. This is nothing. The YouTuber side of this has escalated thanks to Star Wars Theory, the largest Star Wars fan channel on the internet, who has been the frequent centerpiece of what is viewed as the toxic part of the fandom. Theory also constantly bashed the Acolyte with the usual "it's the bad writing and breaks canon" claims, though it's a long pattern of him moving on from focused Star Wars lore discussion to lambasting much of what Disney has produced. Maybe has it occurred to you that he actually liked Star Wars and at some point had to acknowledge that what Disney were doing wasn't good? And Star Wars Explained, from my experience, is basically a channel that if it sees that somebody doesn't like Disney Star Wars, it immediately blocks them. I've been blocked by this account on Twitter for years. I don't think I ever spoke with them, and that doesn't feel very diverse or inclusive. The hate for the Acolyte is unlike anything I've seen in Star Wars history, possibly even more than The Last Jedi. Even though this "We Hate Disney Star Wars" crew has been around for a long while, it did in fact make talking about the Acolyte online with any semblance of positivity practically impossible without being swarmed by what were often devotees of these channels, if not the YouTubers themselves. Again, this is pathetic. People online can discuss something, and if they don't like a show and people are laughing at it because it's not good, they are allowed to do that. And yes, what the fans and the potential customers think about a certain product matters. You can't accuse people of sitting around online and criticizing a show they didn't like. The Acolyte was almost certainly canceled for an absurdly high budget and very low viewership, which third-party estimates have documented as being lower than any other Star Wars series. Right, the money, and it has nothing to do with diversity. You either do something that fans of a franchise like, which are your VIP customers, or you don't. And if you don't whine about it. Don't go crying to newspapers and Forbes and shills and podcasters. Still, the cancellation was absolutely celebrated as a win by this YouTube fan crowd and what they believe is vindication for their hate campaign against the show. It's not a hate campaign against the show. The show wasn't good. If it's not a good show, then it doesn't get renewed. If Amanda Stenberg says she experienced lots of istophobia before and during the airing of the series, she's not lying. And there's multiple examples of istophobia against other actors of color in Star Wars, from John Boyega to Moses Ingram. Okay, way. First of all, she herself attacked people of a certain color, and then she went and she did a video that she was surprised the people of a certain color were upset that she attacked them. Maybe she needs to look in the mirror, this actress. You know, I'm really tired of this misrepresentation of what happened to John Boyega. I'm sure that there are bad people out there. I'm sure that somebody wrote him at some point a crappy islamophobia comment on Twitter at some moment in his life. Do I agree with it? No. It's awful and I condemn it. But the majority of the people that watched The Force Awakens thought that his character was probably the best part of that movie, and it had at least fans interested in seeing where his storyline goes. Rian Johnson came, ruined his storyline, made his character a joke, and even John Boyega himself has said this in different interviews. Whether it's a Star Wars movie or it's a Star Wars TV show on Disney Plus, there will be at least a few million people watching it. When you're a public figure and you're making millions of dollars to be on some show that millions of people are watching, there's always going to be a few weirdos that write a few weird things. And that seems to be what the case was, especially with John Boyega and with Moses Ingram. It would be very, very difficult to mount any sort of campaign to prove against a giant corporate blob like YouTube that specific Star Wars channels are breaking terms of service, not because it's not true necessarily, but getting anyone other than some keyword searching robot to examine this closely is near impossible. Now, this to me is one of the worst parts of the article, because here, what Paul Tassi, in my opinion, is doing, he's saying, I write for Forbes, I'm saying that YouTube isn't taking this seriously. Maybe if they sent somebody that wasn't a bot to look at it, they would take it seriously. Now, this, in my opinion, is one of the crappiest thing that Forbes has ever done. This is just a disgrace to do this. There will be likely nothing to stop this large group of YouTubers and their large audiences. I cannot think of other examples of fandom where a toxic portion has simply been wiped off the map in any meaningful way. It's more pronounced here because Star Wars is one of the worst manifestations of this. You know why all these people online exist? They exist because of you. Forbes was one of the key players back in the day. They used to very aggressively push this narrative that if you don't like The Last Jedi, if you don't like what Kathleen Kennedy is doing, you're an Islamophobe. It was because of these publications that these YouTubers, that these content creators, that even me myself started getting involved in this discussion, not out of Islamophobia, but because there was a feeling that politics were hijacking entertainment. And I think that a lot of people didn't want to see that, and Star Wars became a sort of battleground to save pop culture from being overly politicized. I don't think that without the mainstream media behavior that led to this, I don't know if we'd all be sitting here right now. So to kind of put this spin on it is simply, it's false, it's a lie, and I think it's pathetic. You cannot rely on Disney to back up its harassed actors like they should, and you cannot rely on YouTube to do anything useful here. They are corporations, they care about money above everything else, and they rarely ever listen to fans over issues like this. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Dude, you work for Forbes. You're talking about corporations that care about money? Forbes is all about money. That's literally what you write about. I don't remember anybody at Disney or Lucasfilm having any issue when an actress called Gina Carano was getting harassed because they didn't like her political opinions, and they publicly humiliated her. And that's not what most fans wanted. It wasn't a popular decision. I think that from the day they did that, they also lost a lot of goodwill from fans, because if there was talk until that day that Star Wars had become too much of a political platform, from that day on, it really cemented that that was the case. So yeah, I don't have much hope anything changes here. Not that the movement isn't justified given everything that's happened, but any actual results seem effectively impossible. Follow me on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Oh, you have a YouTube? You have a YouTube? You want to make money on YouTube, and you want to take away other people's money on YouTube? And it's funny that a lot of the people that you want them to not make money have more followers than you. You think you'll take their place? Anyhow, if you enjoyed this video and my take on things, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.